The PSP seems to house some of the weirdest games to ever exist on the planet, from the zany murder mystery of Danganronpa, the numerous bizarre ports of Need for Speed, and some spin-offs for the God of War games. But there is a good reason why this platform was so popular. It's generally a pretty cool platform to own for gaming on the go anywhere at any time. Just look at all the portable PCs coming out of the woodwork just recently. At the cost of less performance and most importantly, usable buttons compared to what we usually have at home consoles, and this poses a ton of challenges for developers as they need to adapt their games to these limitations, which resulted in the weird janky feeling one would experience from these portable versions. But in the face of those motivated and deep into the craft, this wouldn't stop them from innovating with their ideas, and it sure wouldn't stop Genki as well. Yet another Genki game with a weird title change, as the name TXR is apparently tied to Crave Publishing. So who's funding the project then? Well, it's just Konami. Coming out in the year 2005, the same year as TXR Drift 2 and many other games by them, the game itself uses a lot of assets from the previous mainline titles, from the identical Tokyo map and even some repeat boss cars. And it houses one of the most interesting aspects of any TXR game with the power of crew management. For a change, the main campaign this time around is called Team Rumble, announcing the main focus of the game, with the final goal of dominating the entire Tokyo highway street racing scene, alongside a crew of our own, somewhat reminiscent of Carbon Own the City. Unlike the mainline TXR games, we no longer run as a solo wanderer challenging anyone in our path. The game instead has us pick between 3 crews to join and star with, each having their own characteristics, territory, and leader personality. During the first stage of the game, players will be inducted as a member of the crew, with features in this game being most of the basic stuff we'd expect in a TXR game. The capability to earn cash via randomly challenging rivals on the road. However, being published for the PSP comes with its massive drawbacks. The first and the most obvious one is the lack of buttons, which means they can't really assign most of the pre-existing controls backend. No usable triggers, analog buttons, and only one analog for steering. This leaves for only the essentials except for one button, the headlight. In the other mainline games, headlights are used to start a challenge against rivals and will usually be assigned to one of the rear buttons, which is sadly preoccupied with this title. So how do they get out of this predicament? As a trade-off, they remove the blinkers, the open world explorations, and turn challenging rivals into a menu selection from a bunch of weirdly angled cameras scattered throughout the Tokyo highway. The removal of the open world explorations also meant players are now very limited with their movements. We can only pick one area each night, and during stage 1, going outside of our team's territory means we're locked out of ranking battles. This limitation also puts more strategic emphasis on choosing which area to visit for any undefeated rivals, or when to back out to the garage for some upgrades by ending the nights. Either way, this is our current goal for now. Beat everyone we can find, make some bank, power up our ride, and beat stronger rivals. The same progression loop we are used to from the previous games. The game also features a driver level system, but aside from wander requirement and several upgrade levels, this new feature seems to be severely underutilized. The menu itself comes with some dandy quality of life features. Use the RB button to check which rivals is currently populating an area. It will come in handy with our goal of dominating the scene, as it will mark anyone we've beaten as well. Being a team-based racing game, sooner or later we'll have to prepare for team battles. Every time a race is finished, time will progress. During this phase, every crew in the map will be given moves to either weaken crews or initiate a battle for territory control. And when our crew is involved, the call to war will be heard as we're summoned to join the attack or defense. So the rules of a crew battle is for each crew to bring 5 members as representatives. Whoever can eliminate all members of the opposing team first wins the battle. As a member, we're always placed as the first line of attack or defense, meaning we get the opportunity to challenge all 5 opponents back to back. Fair warning though, the SP bar is carried over during team battles, so avoiding damage with the early battles is recommended or risk sinking midway. Early on, this is the fastest way to earn cash, with opponents usually around the medium to high level. You'll earn around 1 to 2 million every team battle, at best with 5 members beaten. If our crew is in the attack position, then the territory and all remaining opposing crew members in that area will defect to our crew. If it's in the defense position, then we can sleep soundly knowing we just dodged a possible game over. Although no one should have to worry about the risk this early in the game. It's likely the game has set a parameter to ensure the player's crew cannot lose a final area during this stage. And with this game's handling having the highest amount of grip within the franchise, even high-powered rear-wheel drive cars don't usually spin out like in the other TXR games. The other thing we get to do as a crew member is climb up the internal crew rankings. As a new member, we start from the bottom and earn the right to challenge the next person on the ranks until we reach up to the leader. But we're not gonna go anywhere near that point without some upgrades. So at this point, we get to pick between upgrading our starter car or buy a new high-powered ride. So if we were to go for the former route, we're gonna have to upgrade either the AE86, Celica, Miata, a Fair Lady, and an MRS. Upgrading in this game is pretty similar to what we have in TXR3, with power upgrades consisting of engine, exhaust, cooling system, and a new addition to this game, the NOS feature, followed by the powertrain upgrades for the transmission, clutch, suspension, and the brakes. Body upgrades for weight management, tires and wheels to change the composition and rims, and finally, aero parts consist of body parts and visual upgrades, although in this game we no longer have the individual part options, so front bumpers, skirts, and rear bumpers are all packaged into one big body kit set. Street Supremacy also introduces the neon lights customizations with several configurations. The odd thing is the color settings separated into the color customization page alongside body and headlight option. Also, Decals ditched the custom drawing system and replaces it with the fixed selection similar to what we would see in Drift 2, but with limited options. Stickers unfortunately do not return as it would clash with the new crew system, although it would be cool if there's a feature to change our crew icons once we take over, with a lot more options added once we enter the major progression point. So other than the 5 starters, we got 20 other cars to pick from: the Evos, Imprezas, Skylines, Silvias, RX-8s and 7s, and a couple of sedans. These costs range from 2 million at the lowest to 5 million at its peak. Look, I'm just as confused as you are with these numbers. The TXR version of Japan really went through some of the most violent inflation known to mankind. It'll make the Turkish blush. Including upgrades, these cars will cost a total of 10 to 20 million in funds, at which point we might want to consider buying custom cars instead. They're essentially boss cars we can purchase for our personal use. They come in pre-upgraded conditions and there's not much options to tune them, but they mostly cost around the 6 million price point, with something like Midnight Cinderella's RX-8 or Jackknife's S13, or around the 10 million mark with his goofy Gundam-inspired R34, or even Jintei's own Emperor R34. One thing to note is the version of these boss cars we can acquire will always be a different cosmetic variant than what the boss themselves drives. Granted, to get access to these cars, we need to beat the owners at least once. Fortunately, the high-level bosses aren't exactly equipped with extreme rubber band turbo. In fact, this game is arguably the easiest in the franchise, when even some of the hardest well-known returning bosses are quite easy to beat in this specific title. This will become even more apparent once we've entered Stage 2. This is where features and content starts to open up with the leader privilege. We now have the option to pick which territory to invade, poach rival crews into our own, and pick members to attack and defend territories. But first, we need to do what any newly appointed leader should do: increase our members' loyalty, with some unique methods. Okay, not those methods, but just challenging our own crew members, as any member could defect once their loyalty is low enough. The same applies for rival members as well. By lowering their loyalty, the chance of them accepting an invite into our crew increases. This is going to be the main way of progression, as the more members defect, the lower an area stability is. And once it gets low enough, it opens the area for a takeover battle. But you gotta react quickly, otherwise another team may snatch that territory for themselves. No! You sons of bitches! I literally made them weak and they just yoinked it. Now you may be wondering, what about the Wanderers? Can we recruit them?
Yes!
Originally in the mainline series or even the Drift games, Wanderers have certain specific requirements to even challenge them, but since there's a change in the way we challenge rivals, Street Supremacy instead opted to move the Wanderer criterias into recruitment requirements instead. As a result, each Wanderer got their specific criterias, which as per usual can be normal, mundane, and suddenly become quite bizarre. From simple stuff like how many territories you own, or straight up having to recruit every member of the 13 Devils first. These Wanderers come in unique style and presentation, as their cars are visually tuned to match their weird characteristics, with examples of the Red Comet with yet another Gundam-inspired body kit, arguably the craziest one yet, Hard Weapon's heavy ballistic tuned Evo, Silver Wolf's Knight Rider-inspired machine, Pluto and his Weeby Tasha, the Devil Z, and a legally distinct Honda NSX. But overall, the Wanderers in this game have quite a tame requirement, especially when compared to TXR3, making it the easiest game to 100%. In fact, these Wanderers are the major reason as to why this game's difficulty turns into the easiest one there is. Once they are in the crew, due to their high level and high performance cars, most rivals instantly fold over in their presence. We rarely even have to lift a finger against enemy crews once we get at least 2 or 3 Wanderers available for any crew operations. As a general rule of the game, during an attack towards enemy territory, we get to pick any members available from the crew, making takeovers quite easy, but when it comes to the defense, the rule is now swapped. Only crew members assigned in that area can be chosen as an active racer for the defense. Now I need to add this for context, but we can't take over areas that are not next to an area we already own. The same rule applies for the opponents as well, so to avoid having to defend areas, try to quickly take over an area with an aggressive crew. Rinse and repeat this process until all territories are yours. This game does not have any form of boss races, as most bosses from the previous games are now relegated into the position of recruitable Wanderers. But it's not exactly the end of the game. Just like with TXR3, an option to do New Game Plus is unlocked by loading the clear data. Doing this unlocks the option to join any crew you want, which provides a different selection of dialogues as we progress. And so that's pretty much it. Unlike most TXR games, this one is pretty short with a lot of tedious repetition during its crew battles. It's certainly unique though, with the idea of putting players into the shoes of a crew member and even a leader, giving a completely different perspective into the racing scene compared to the regular mainline titles. And it kinda had built up disappointment for Importuner Challenge, as it could have been an interesting mainline title to have included a crew system, especially with its story of bringing the Speed King back into the scene. Regardless, Street Supremacy arguably deserved better, and it's certainly one PSP racing title I would happily recommend to anyone to try out.